Former Saracens and England flanker Maggie Alphonsi grew up in the borough of Lewisham to a single-parent family. A club fit was something which she would overcome in her pursuit of success. In her career, Maggie was named a Sunday Times Sportswoman of the Year, was a Six Nations Grand Slam winner 6 times, and was the first woman to win the Rugby Union Writers Club Player of the Year. In her 2012 birthday honours, she was awarded an MBE for her services to rugby and now has become a regular pundit on ITV's coverage of the Six Nations and World Cup. I caught up with one of the most influential figures in the sport to talk equality, communities, and her recollections on her lifetime in rugby. Ladies and gentlemen, Maggie Alphonsi. Maggie, welcome to Beyond the Title. Regular listeners will know that I like to celebrate pioneers and heroes from every form of entertainment. Would you describe yourself as somewhat of a pioneer of women's sports?
Oh, good question. I would. I would say I am. Look, I would say that I am a small cog in what has been a real big machine. There's been many other people before me who have led the way and made a difference to women's sport, women's rugby. And I've been quite privileged just to have a little impact. Look, when I started, women's rugby wasn't popular at all. And I guess my role that I played in the women's game was I was a strong physical character, which I do believe had a big impact on the way people started to look at women's rugby, that they felt that we're strong, athletic. I felt like I was starting to be taken seriously like many other women. So I definitely feel like I helped get it moving. And what's great now that the women's game has gone to another level. And that's just because there's many people before me and hopefully myself as well that have made an impact just to get it started.
Why do you sing because love here?
Why do you think it's seen such a growth in, say, the last 10 years or so?
Um, I would say the reason why we've seen such a growth in women's sport, women's rugby, is because I just think there's been a big change on the way society now sees women. I think there's a big focus that, got to start taking women's sport seriously. There's been greater interest in broadcasting now. So you find more broadcasters are starting to show women's sport, women's rugby in particular. And as a result of that, we're getting more sponsors. So that I think adds to the credibility of it. I would also say now most women's international rugby teams are professional as well. So, when you start to pay your athletes and they have the right program, the right structure around them, all of a sudden the product and the quality of the performance is obviously a lot better. So, I'd say there's a combination of all of those things that have added to the progression of women's sport. Also, I would say there's been greater development in the people who are in the influential seats. So decision makers. I think there's been greater diversity in the sense that there's more people starting to change the way they perceive women's sport. So people are making decisions and saying, look, we need to watch women's sport. We need to put it on the TV. And I think that's also had an impact. So it's been a variety of different elements, but I feel they've all contributed to the progression of women's sport.
I'm fascinated by geographical communities and how they have the power to influence lives. Growing up in Lewisham in the 80s and 90s, what was it about the tightness of the community that gave you a sense of belonging?
Yeah, really interesting. So I was actually the interesting fact was that I was born in Lewisham, so South London, and then as I got older, well, quite early on in my youth, I moved to North London, Edmonton. So it depends where I am in the world. I always say I'm really a South Londoner, and then I also then say I was born and bred in North London. Um, so it was really interesting. So growing up in North London later on, there were highs and lows. I grew up on a council estate, and the area that I lived on was quite deprived. I lived with a single parent mother. Most people who lived on the estate that I lived on had single parents, so that was very much the norm. I can't lie to you, there also was a lot of fights and gang involvements where I lived. So we had it all, if I'm honest, but I have no regrets as well of where I grew up. I very much felt like it drove me on. It gave me motivation to, I guess, want to get out of that environment. And also felt like I fitted in, because we all had the same sort of background, the all same sort of start. So it wasn't easy, but it very much gave me the drive to feel like I needed to find a way out. And I had the great support around me with my mother.
Who were your heroes growing up?
Oh, good question. Who were my heroes? So I would say the first person that was my hero growing up had to be Denise Lewis. So, Great Britain heptathlete, won gold at the Sydney Olympics. She was my out and out hero because I guess growing up, they always say if you can't see it, you can't be it. So it's finding role models who obviously have similar backgrounds or similar visibility to you. And I was like, wow, like she's really cool. She's achieved so much. She is absolutely owning it. And I was like, I possibly could be like her. I mean, at the time, I didn't think I could be like her, but I was inspired by her. So I would say she was my first big hero. And then after that, I think you have many others who kind of like sort of inspire you along the way. So then I saw Jonah Lomu, who played rugby for New Zealand. He was a man mountain, and I was just impressed by this man who would run, and literally people would sort of hang off him. And he just sort of changed the way I guess rugby was seen. So I'd say those two were my heroes growing up. And then as I got older, I started to look at other different kind of role models. But those two were the first people that really kind of sparked my imagination of what I could achieve.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that about well, when Josh was growing up, he would be watching TV and there was just nobody that looked like him on TV, no one that represented him. And a while ago, we interviewed Rosie Jones, the comedian,
Awesome. Yeah.
and she was saying the same thing. There was just no one around on telly that represented that looked like you guys, and no disability, someone with that sort of disability. Do you ever feel that over the years that you may have been misrepresented in any way?
Yeah. Again, another good question. So I think the frustration that I've had is there's always this assumption. I think that's what it is. There's assumption that this is what you stand for, this is who you are, because that you, I guess, represent certain characteristics. Can't necessarily give an example, but there has been times where I do feel like I've been misrepresented, and I think the hardest thing that I have found is how do you call it out? How do you challenge those assumptions? How do you do it in a way that it's public or not public? Because You don't like, I've always found, especially, I guess, being a black woman, I've always found that I don't want to come across like the angry black woman, which is a very much a stereotype that sometimes gets misrepresented in public and in the media. So you sort of kind of think, how do I put myself across that doesn't meet those stereotypes or the way that people feel like they should perceive me? So I guess what I've always tried to do is present a certain way how I want to be presented, and where I have been misrepresented, try and call it out. Well, actually, no, always call it out. That's the obvious thing. Call it out, and with the hope that you calling it out, you give others sort of permission to do the same. I think that's really key because you can't almost. I think if you accept it, you sort of are playing into their narrative, which I don't agree with.
How do you think sport has the power to change and create communities?
Oh, okay. Right. I think what I love about sport is the fact that it's really visible. And by that I mean when people see what sport is doing, they almost feel like they come along with it. They come along with the journey. People's stories can be told. That's what I find with sport. And what sport has done for me in particular has given me confidence that I never thought I would have had because I'm growing up, so I lacked confidence. One for because of my size and my shape. So when I was young, I always was quite big, had big arms, big legs, and I guess playing sport, people really appreciated that and valued me for my size and my shape. Where I think in a school environment, sometimes I would get picked on or bullied because I didn't sort of look like the other girls. So I would say what sport does, or what it did for me, was it gave me the confidence in my body in particular. The second thing that I find sport is really good for is just being able to allow you to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, enable you to work with others around you. But also, I found that's really helped me in the world as a leader. So I've learned to, I guess, again, know how to manage teams. I've learned how to, I guess, lead from the front. I've learned how to step out of my comfort zone. So those things have really helped me as an individual being in sport. But I do think sport has really had a huge impact on how women in particular, people with disabilities, people of color, or of any race or background or faith, I guess are seen in society. And I think that's huge, because it's just visible. So I'm really grateful to sport, because sometimes I think we can then control our narrative through sport. So yeah, sports had a huge impact on me, and I do feel just how generally people are perceived.
There's a popular assumption that rugby is only for the elite classes, but in recent times this has been challenged. How influential is sport in levelling up the social classes?
Yeah, and great. So look, it's funny, like rugby has such a stereotype, which hasn't really kind of disappeared, if I'm truly honest. So I guess the assumption would be it's from a, sort of upper class background. You have to have wealth, and you have to be from a certain part of society, and potentially you might have to be white, So I think what has been really interesting about rugby is that I love the sport because I truly believe it's a sport for all. It doesn't matter your background, your ability, where you've come from, like it just doesn't matter. Like there's a place for you. I always believe that there's a place for you. And I think what sport has done, what rugby has done, has almost kind of tried to level up. And by that, I find when I've played rugby, what I love is that everyone on my team, it does not matter where you've started or what your background is, the overall objective is usually just to win the game. We're all wearing the same item of clothing, we're all part of the same brand, and it almost like it gives you this opportunity to go, we're all in it for the same reason, which is to potentially win. And it does not matter where you started from or what your background is. And I didn't come from I came from, a very deprived background. I went to a typical comprehensive school. I've never really had money. So, I feel really proud to think that I came into sport and I've been able to get to the same destination compared to my counterparts who have maybe come from a more privileged background. You can make your own well, destiny, and you can make sure it plays into where you want it to go. So for me, I've been very fortunate, but I do think sports had an impact on leveling up, if I'm honest, and then ensuring that doesn't matter where you've come from, where your background is, or where your start is, you can end up in the same place as anyone else. Sorry, it's a very long-winded response. Apologies. I hopefully it was a good response, but it was a very long-winded one.
Okay. Hello. From in there I hope and this one has a better result. Risk that is a bit more if that was you prefer.
Yeah. So Josh has a lot of friends who are into rugby,
Oh, yes.
and Josh has always been more of a football fan.
Oh, Josh, no.
Uh, but basically, I think Josh just said it's his friends' attitudes towards rugby and how Josh was introduced to it that has sort of put Josh off the game and like trying to get into it more. And he thinks if he had a better introduction to it, then maybe he'd be more of a fan right now.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I think it's really funny with the Sport Rugby Union. I always find it depends on how you find your way in is what kind of makes you go, I like the sport or I don't like it. Um, and I think when I first found it, my way in was through my PE teacher. So my PE teacher, who was a Welsh woman, she just got me into the sport, and I think that's what was a very nice introduction. It made me really like it. I went to my local rugby club and I was like, oh, I really like the people, I like the attitude, and it was very welcoming. But you're absolutely right. I think if your first access point into it is just not welcoming, it sort of just puts you right off. And I think rugby definitely previously used to have quite interesting, varied attitudes, which really were slightly off-putting. And I think now it's become such a broad, open sport that it's better at welcoming people in. So I'm hoping, Josh, after you speaking to me today, that you're going to be like, I love rugby. This is the best sport ever. I meant to ask you, Josh, who do you support? Because I'm an Arsenal fan. I didn't want to say it at the start, but I'm red and white all over.
Yes.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's not who we support. We're not Spurs fans.
Okay, that's good.
We're United fans.
All right, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. As long as you're not on my other side of the derby with the Tottenham.
We're unfortunately going through the pain and turmoil of being a United fan at the moment.
I know. I don't envy you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're old enough to remember when they were last good. Oh God, yeah. Let's not go any deeper into that. I've watched beer all day. In your opinion, what more should be done to improve grassroots sport?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic right now because actually I think after COVID we did see a dip in grassroots sports, in particular rugby. So I lean into rugby a bit more. And I think the big focus we have in rugby in particular is about trying to stop the leakage. And by that I mean, people find the sport, let's say, when they're really young at school, and then at some point they drop out. And there's various different reasons, really. Sometimes it can be basic barriers like traveling to games. It could be a financial barrier. It could be my friends aren't playing the sport, so why would I want to play it? So there's various different things, but then there's other barriers, like a big topic right now is around concussion, and I totally understand that that is an area that it's about making sure that the sport is safe. And I think a lot of parents obviously naturally worry. So there's various different barriers and different areas that are starting to can be a concern. So the big focus that we have to try and ensure that we get more people into grassroots sport or grassroots rugby in particular is to keep emphasizing the key attributes of what makes our sport special. And I always say, it's quite common, I love the teamwork around rugby. I love the respect, I love the discipline, the sportsmanship, the enjoyment, all of those things is what makes rugby special. But also, I do think we need to do more about making sport at school more accessible, more enjoyable, and less around obviously just the competition of it, but more about what you can get out of it that's a benefit. Because I guess what we find at school sometimes, because I used to work for a charity called the Youth Sport Trust, and our big focus was all about school sport. And what you sometimes see is, and I understand due to financial constraints, but at school, the thing that they cut is physical education or time for people to be active. And actually, it's so important for kids to be able to experience just being active and finding the sport that suits them. Not all the traditional sports work for everyone. So how do we open up, provide more sport opportunities and support the teachers and the coaches that also deliver that as well. So I think that's how we can really improve grassroots sports, providing more support and investments at school, at the grassroots club, again, further investment and support. Um, and also the hardest thing, what we're seeing right now, is more young people are really are interested in social media, interested in gaming, interested in things that probably keep young people away from being physically active. So how do we, sell grassroots sport more and the benefits of it? That's probably the big question we have to ask ourselves now.
I when I for school, I didn't to any to any hurt some woman so yeah and what could I would oh yeah but now what what would and so what yeah
Yeah, I always look back at my school days, and I didn't. Well, Josh didn't do PE. He ended up doing extra lessons in the subjects that you were good at, that you excelled at. And now you look back on those days and think, oh, if someone like me did do PE, what sort of impact would that have had?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, I do think if schools had greater support just to ensure that they opened up their accessibility for just helping our students get into or find the sport that works for them, that will suit them. I do think you'll see more kids get into grassroots sports. And like you've already touched on, it's about opening up the availability to work with different people with different abilities, and find what works for them. Like for me, rugby worked for me. But God, if there was a sport that would have been focused on you, then you would have found that sport as well. So it is really interesting. I think we do need to do more at grassroots level, because if we don't, what happens is we lose people and then they find something else.
How did it feel making your debut for your country?
Oh, okay. So I made my debut at the age of 19 years old, and I'll be honest, I didn't think that day would ever come. I got the phone call from the England head coach at the time, It would have been about a good few weeks before we went on tour. And I was just like, I can't believe I'm going to get the chance to, wear the white jersey, represent my country. And it was so special. So look, I made my debut out in Canada against USA. And let's be really honest, there was barely anyone watching. But that was my special day that I feel, will go down in my memories forever. But I felt really proud just wearing that jersey. It wasn't so much the making the debut that was a special thing. It was actually all the people that had supported me along the way, who had believed in me, who had been there for me when I had my low points as well as my high points. So when I got the chance to sing the anthem, I was just like, oh my God, I'm finally doing it. And thank you to everyone that had helped me along the way. But what I guess I didn't really appreciate, getting your first cap or getting your first debut is special, but really it's about trying to get your next one and the one after that. So yeah, it was really special. I just loved singing my anthem and realizing that the journey had taken so long, but I'd finally made it.
What are the main differences between being on an international tour and playing for a club?
Oh, okay, right. Main differences. So when you like, I guess times have changed now. Like professionalism has really changed. So at club level and at international level, the professionalism is pretty much the same now. But back in my day, when you played for your country, the things that were different, just the level of support that you got. So you had your physio, you had your doctor, you had a massage therapist. You had everything. You had everyone that covered every need, and you felt like you were royalty. That's how the best way to put it in the most simplest way. I felt like I was royalty, and I felt like we were just given that level of consideration and we were valued. So you'd go on tour for a good few weeks. You were put in really good accommodation. Your every need was catered to. When you're in the hotel, the chef had already been spoken to by your team chef. So the food that was provided was good quality and really healthy. Even though I wanted to stray off into really but naughty food, you couldn't because you were always looked after. Um, so I just felt like I was at this point where, that I couldn't go wrong. Everything was catered for. You were supported well. You had the right um trainers to manage your physical well-being. You had the right psychologist to help you mentally as well. So we had it all. And I think the difference you had with club was like club for me felt quite, I guess the best word to use was that it felt amateur. We were amateur athletes at that time. So realistically, I was always, if I wasn't working, I was training, and you go to your club training, and everyone who was there, had jobs. So it always felt like you're just able to manage the demands of playing at club level because we all had to work, and training was only twice a week. You played on a Saturday or a Sunday. Your local club was like real grassroots club. So I loved playing that club because I always felt like you choose to be there. So people chose to come to my club, which was Saracens, and I felt like you had a real family feel. But it was amateur, you turned up, you very much looked after yourself. And actually, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm so pleased that I grew up in that era and played sport at that era, because you had to just learn to like look after yourself and do it for your teammates, and also look after your club, because your club won't sustain itself without you giving it some support. So um the significant differences were, like I said, at international level, I felt like I was royalty. At club level, I felt like I got stuck in, which I'm very grateful of it, and I will never forget my club. I'm very much feel like I'm still part of it.
As an athlete, how do you go about knowing the right time to retire?
I'll be honest, I retired. I would say that I retired back in officially 2015 from club and 2014 from international. And I didn't really know at the time if that was the right time to retire, but I just knew that I was not getting any younger, and everyone who was coming behind me were very young, and they were snapping at my heels. And I also just knew that I had achieved everything that I wanted to achieve or knew that I could achieve. And it's time for others to be able to do the same. And if anything, excel what I had achieved. So that's how I think I knew it was the right time. Have you achieved what you wanted to achieve? If so, tick. Are there others who are coming behind you who are as competitive as you and have got time ahead of them to do more? Yes. So tick, maybe that's another reason why you should move on. And also, how is your body coping with the demands? So for myself, I had a big knee operation before I retired where I had a meniscus repair and I was out for almost like a year. So actually, I knew that my body was slowly kind of struggling with the demands of the sport, and women's rugby was getting more professionalized. So, you had to be fit, you had to be able to take the demands of the training that was being required. So those things started to make me realize that I needed to step away from it. And to be honest, I feel like I stepped away at the right time. We won a Rugby World Cup in 2014. I felt like personally I'd achieved what I wanted to achieve, and my team had achieved the big goal that we'd set out to achieve a very long time ago. And then also there were some really good players coming behind me. One player, a lady called Marley Packer, who went on to captain England after I had stepped away. So she was brilliant, and she was really putting in some amazing performances that I needed to move away. And also then my body as well was struggling with the demands. So that was the right time for me. But for many athletes, it's really hard to decide when you're going to retire. And you're very lucky if you get to do it on your own, if you get to make that decision, because most of the time it's usually done by a coach who says I'm not selecting you, or alternatively it can be through injury. So I was really lucky to make it on my own, and use my own sort of decisions. But yeah, I do miss it. I do miss it. I wish I could still play, but the game has moved on so far that I don't think my body could take it, to be honest. But they're all young whippersnappers now, but they're doing really well. So I'm very jealous.
In 2012, you were awarded an MBE in the Queen's Birthday Honours. How did you find out about this, and how do you think this increased awareness of the sport?
Yeah, so I got it back then. So what happened was the letter was sent to the wrong address. So by chance it came to me. So it was sent to the my rugby club at Saracens, and just by chance the groundsman who was looking after the facilities got the letter and said, "This letter looks quite significant." So it had the royal stamp on, and he was able to get my phone number and message me and let me know that there's a letter for me. So I luckily got the letter, and then I was like, wow, this letter does look significant and important. I opened it, and it said you'd been awarded an MBE. And I think what's really funny, because I've never thought I'd ever make an honours list. And I always think if you make an honours list, it's usually when you've retired, when you've finished playing. But I was still playing at the time. So I was incredibly overwhelmed by it. And I told my mother, and she was overwhelmed by it. And I found that I was going to get it from Buckingham Palace, which I had never been to Buckingham Palace. The only time I've seen Buckingham Palace is on the outside by the gates. And I was like, wow. So it was really special. It was such a special occasion. And I do think, I mean, prior to me, there had been some other athletes that had got MBEs in women's rugby. So to be able to be part of that, like that illustrious list of really impressive individuals, I felt very special. And the day itself was special. Princess Anne gave me my MBE, and she's a massive rugby fan. I didn't know that at the time, but she's a massive rugby fan. She loves Scotland, and it just was quite special to be able to get it from someone like her, but then to also get it at Buckingham Palace, and to have my mother with me as well was really special. So overall, it was a really lovely time, and I do think it had an impact on the women's game, because now you see more people in the women's game get recognised on the honours list.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. Okay. Alors, when you put resume, you come out.
Uh, Josh just asked, do you use your MBE title a lot? Like maybe when you're booking a restaurant and people see letters after your name, does it work well for you? Or has it?
Well, Josh, you know this, like you've hit the nail on the head. Yes, I have used it on certain occasions if I want to get a booking. So yes, every now and again. I mean, you know, some restaurants are hard to get in. If you just put on the MBE at the end, some of them go. She seems like she's important. I'll get her. I'll get her a reservation. But no, most of the time, I actually don't use it. I think it's really interesting. Like I feel so proud and so privileged to have the MBE, but then at the same time, I've met so many amazing people who've done fantastic things in society in the world that I sometimes feel like me just being a sports person doesn't really match up to what they've achieved. So I'm so honored to have it. But I've also been absolutely overwhelmed by those that have done some amazing things who also have MBEs or who don't have them. So I don't actually always show it off, but every now and again I might roll it out. But generally, when I hear of some of the stories that people have like done amazing things and they've got like MBEs, OBEs, CBEs, whatever it is, or you know knights or damehoods, I think, oh wow, that's impressive. So I don't think I could ever match what they've achieved. So I'm honoured by it, but I'm also more in awe of those who have done some amazing things.
After retirement, you became a pundit for international rugby tournaments, mostly with ITV. In the past decade, the sports broadcasting landscape has changed dramatically with mixed pundits in almost every sport. In your opinion, how will we look back on this period in advancements in sports broadcasting? And is there anything that you would like to see change?
Yeah, really interesting. So when I retired, I had an opportunity to be a pundit on the Men's Rugby World Cup back in 2015. So it was in England. And at that time, I'd been the first woman to be a pundit on men's rugby, I think in the United Kingdom and Ireland. So I sort of like just to be a pundit. Most there was mainly was women reporters, but not or presenters, but not pundits. And I'll be honest, at the time, I was sort of nervous by it, anxious by it, especially, you know, feeling like you had to really make sure that you didn't make a mistake. Um, and what's been brilliant over that time, you know, God, what so much time has passed since then. There's way more variety of people who are providing a perspective on the sport. And I'll talk about rugby mainly, but I love the fact that there is that variety. You know, it doesn't mean you still don't get lots of negativity on social media. I'll be really open and honest. I still get a load of negative perspectives, but then also at the same time, I get really positive ones. People are like, fantastic, you know, you're providing your opinion, your perspective. You know, also you've achieved something yourself. You've won a World Cup. You've been part playing the sport for a very long time. I also, you know, have other roles in the sport, in world of governance, sitting on the RFU Council, and just having various other leadership roles within rugby. So I'm really pleased the landscape of broadcasting has changed because you have to get the perspectives of different people who observe the sport as fans, who play the sport. And I just think it adds to the product as well. Because if you want to grow the sport and its audience, you have to get a range of people talking on it as well. So I'm really pleased that the landscape has changed. And I think the attitudes to it has also changed. You still get a slightly minority of people who are quite negative about it, but you've just got to my attitude is always to keep showing up because I'm speaking to those that I like to think are inspired by it and who want to hear your opinions and your voice rather than those that hate you. So you know, it's about trying to keep changing that perspective and those mindsets that actually, you know, if you know the sport, you've been part of the sport, or you understand the sport, then actually you can provide your opinions too. And I do think it's really having a big impact on the landscape of broadcasting.
As a TV historian, I'm fascinated with the many differences between BBC and ITV, and one of the best ways to compare them is by their sports broadcasting. In your
Hmm.
opinion, how much insight is being lost by the network's commitment to the commercial break format?
Ooh, interesting question. Oh, okay. I'm quite. I have to think about this question because obviously I work for both. So I think it's fascinating because obviously broadcasters like ITV obviously have commercials, and they obviously they provide and they're paid for obviously that funds the channel, and then you've also got BBC that is obviously public and doesn't have commercials. I always find it really interesting. So if I'm watching it as a fan, um, I find commercials that they add to the product because obviously they're selling stuff, they're trying to get a brand across. Um, for some people, it gives people a break to be able to go and do something in between. But some people might see it as that it can also interfere with the quality of the programming that you're watching. And then obviously when you're watching something like BBC, there are no commercials, but the breaks that are in between are obviously promoting programs that are on the channel. I don't really know how to best explain this. I find it really interesting. I think it's interesting and it's I value both. I value both because I also understand what commercials bring and how their investments also ensure that you get really good products on TV as well, like dramas, entertainment. They fund that, but then also the public adds to the quality of the programs that have been added as well. I can't. I feel like I'm in between. I'm not helping you here, Josh. I'm sitting on the fence, which is not what you want. It's because it's very difficult because I do work for both, so I value and understand both. And I struggle to really criticize both because I think they both have their place.
Yeah, oh, what I would get out of yeah, hey, I won't go. Great.
Yeah, I think Josh, the angle that Josh was sort of trying to get at more was to do
Hmm.
the analysis side of things.
Oh, got ya.
Josh appreciates more of a focus on some sort of detailed analysis. There's more content within that analysis, and BBC can offer more of a richer view on that because they don't have the commitment of the commercials.
Yeah, no, right. That's a good. Okay, right. So I absolutely agree with you. I think it's what's interesting because I work for both. What's interesting with when you work for BBC is that you do have more time to discuss and talk about a particular angle of the sport. And you're absolutely right. So I'm from the world of rugby, but if you look at other sports, you see exactly the same when they're on the BBC. They can really go into a lot of detail, um, and you can take it to a different, I guess, you could take it to different sort of angles because you had the time to do that. I think you're absolutely right. When you've got commercials, you're very limited to what is sometimes quite a short hit, I guess, to the cameras, where you've kind of got to discuss only certain topics and you haven't got very long to go into a lot of details into that. And I think that is always going to be the challenge. I think that's always a challenge. I think that's what you find when I work for ITV. You have to be much more concise. You have to get to the point quite quickly. And I guess where there are more detail required, you just got to think about how you deliver that. I think also the challenge you have when you're working on free to air is how much do you go into detail? Because I guess when you've got free to air, people sometimes are just clicking on off, switching on and might have not followed the journey of a team, a player. especially in rugby where it's not on free to air a lot, so you have to sometimes feel like not necessarily you're not starting again, but you have to frame it in a way that you're kind of like introducing it again. And sometimes there's not a lot of time to do that. So you're absolutely right. There's real how pundits and analysis is done is really interesting. You have to be more concise, maybe on channels where there's adverts, but where there is not, you sort of got time to breathe and let it speak a bit more and go into a bit more detail because the space is there.
Why do you think sport is so significant to the structure of the nation?
Oh, these are really good questions. Okay, all right. Why sport? Um, I don't know. I think when I think about our nation, our country, I always think we love our sport. We've never really necessarily been great at one sport. We've been brilliant at a variety, and we've never necessarily got it over the line. And I think I always think England in particular, like I think we've been very passionate about like football. Like we love football. Like that's like I'm not necessarily a massive football fan, but I was one of the things that I was pushed into when I was really young was football. Like you support it. If you don't play it, you support a team. And when I grew up in North London, if you have to support Tottenham or Arsenal like that. So it's always been ingrained in you that we love our sport. Whether you're competing it, playing it, doesn't matter, but you have to have some sort of team to follow. And it's really fascinating that it's been very much the fabric of our nation. But what's been interesting over the last few years is that we've been great at other sports and that we've been really getting it over the line that you feel like it's starting to become very much our identity. We're good at sport, and we generally find our way sometimes into finals. And at the domestic level, we've always been very competitive. So I don't know if I'm actually answering your question, but I love the fact that as a nation, sport is really quite important to us, and we've always kind of, prided ourselves on being good at it. Football, I like to think we're pretty good at both men's and women's, and in various different abilities. We like to think we're up there at the Olympics. We're always like leading the way, for Great Britain and Ireland, Northern Ireland. So we've always like I feel like we're always leading the way, but it has become quite a big important factor in our identity now. I don't know if I've answered the question. Hopefully, I've answered the question.
Okay, it's all good.
Yeah.
Looking back at your career, what's your proudest achievement?
So, listen, I feel like I had a really long career. My career hasn't stopped. Like I feel like I'm still on my journey. But winning a World Cup was incredibly a special moment. But my proudest achievement had to be just graduating and getting my undergraduate degree. I went to De Montfort University in Bedford. It's now called Bedford University, and I did a sport and exercise science degree. I never thought at any stage I would go to university, especially where I grew up. And to be able to go to university to graduate, I just felt really proud. And my mum was there, for my graduation. I think that was my biggest hurdle in life, and I never thought I'd do it. I went on and did it. Then I went on to do a master's, then an MBA, and I've got aspirations to do a PhD soon. I just got to get the I've got to get the motivation to do it. But I just feel like that was my beginning of my proudest moment, and I've really been passionate about education. And then sport has just I feel like sport has been just part of that journey that's come along. So winning that World Cup was incredibly special. But I think the education side of it had to be my proudest moment, and having my mum there to be there with me when I graduated was very special.
What is her work? Where you are going now, now, minutes about
What was the attitudes towards doing a sports science degree when you went through it? Because at the moment, there seems to be sort of a mixed bag sort of reaction to doing that sort of degree.
Yeah, yeah. That's why when I said it, I was like, I did a sports science degree, which I think, and I would say at that time, pretty much lots of people did it, and the perception was it was quite a um the words that people would use would be it's a very fluffy, woolly kind of course that anyone can do, and where is it going to take you? And I have absolutely no regret in doing that degree because at the time I wasn't quite sure about what I wanted to do. Um, I mean, initially I wanted to be a physical education teacher, PE teacher, because I was really inspired by my PE teacher who got me into rugby. And then I realized, okay, I don't necessarily want to do that. So, okay, when I go to university, I want to do something that's going to kind of give me the qualifications and the skills that will enable me to go into probably a variety of different roles. So I, yep, went and did my sport and exercise degree, and I just found what I enjoyed. And actually, the thing that I was really fascinated by was sports psychology. So it was nothing to do with biomechanics or human biology or any other aspects of sports science. I absolutely love sports psychology, and that's what kind of drove me on to do my master's and my MBA. I love understanding what drives people. I love understanding what keeps you going and how you push yourself beyond, I guess, what others think you're capable of. And that was always my driver, really. And then, so now in my work, I do broadcasting, but I also do a lot of work in leadership, and I love understanding how you motivate people. And sport, is, I guess, for me, has been the hook. But I just love the element of psychology. So yeah, I think now you see a lot of students do sports science, and I always say like if that's the degree you want to take, take it, and then think about what really excites you about the different elements of that degree. You find what is your niche. And for me, again, it was sports psychology. So that's why I have no regrets in taking that degree because it gave me a broad perspective of what was out there, and then I just sort of like I guess found what was specific and relevant to me.
So just to finish off, what's next for Maggie Alphonsi?
Oh, right. So what's next? So basically, look, I had massive aspirations. So governance is the thing that I'm in that too at the moment. So I currently sit on the RFU council, and my time on the council is actually coming to an end. My aspirations were to become the president of the RFU council, which is very much a 1 year role, but really, I have massive aspirations to create change. Like I really want the sport, which is rugby union, to definitely be a sport for everyone, like to be open to everyone, to represent people in different abilities, backgrounds, whatever it may be. And I feel like our sport is still on that journey. So I guess what's next for me is to hopefully you'll see me take on some leadership roles. Who knows? Continue with the RFU, hopefully World Rugby. That's my aspiration. I can't put a definition on it as of yet, but let's just say that I'm working towards that right now. Because I just feel like it's a sport that I absolutely loved. It changed my life. It saves my life. And I do believe it has the impact to, well, just sport generally has the impact to benefit people in many different ways. But the next big focus actually is the Women's Rugby World Cup that starts on the 22nd of August and concludes on the 27th of September. So I'm hoping to be doing work in the broadcasting field. I work for BBC, just promoting that because I think it's going to be big. If England potentially get to the final, they could possibly sell out Allianz Twickenham Stadium, and that will be such a game-changing moment for women's rugby. So yeah, fingers crossed. That's what I'm hoping. I'm more involved in over the next few months, and I'm hoping that they hopefully get it over the line and increase the following of women's sport, women's rugby.
Is it coming home?
Is it coming home? Yes. I'm going to say yes. If they don't do it, you can happily edit the podcast and just say no, no. But yeah, I hope they do. I hope they do. Fingers crossed.
Great, great.
Yes. And hurry. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've encouraged me now to get into rugby, and I'll be watching.
Yes, Josh. I would like to say that you've encouraged me to become a Man United fan, but nah. Josh, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you, Ian, as well. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks.
And thank you. Look, have a great day. Take care.